Your apartment is now ours. Jennifer's voice echoed through my phone, laced with a smugness that made my blood pressure spike. Don't bother threatening legal action. We both know you'd never take your own sister to court. The line went dead, but her words reverberated in my head as I stared at the unfamiliar blue walls of what was once my suburban home. They had changed the locks, repainted the walls, and even replaced my furniture, all without permission. This property that had taken me years of overtime and careful budgeting to afford had been claimed by my younger sister and her fiance as if it were their birthright. Standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by moving boxes I'd filled with their belongings, I felt something break inside me, not in sorrow, but in liberation. After 55 years of being the responsible one, the provider, the safety net, I was finally choosing myself. Ma'am, where do you want these boxes taken? The mover asked, clipboard in hand. I handed him a slip of paper with the storage unit information. Everything goes there. Make sure it's stacked neatly so they can access it. As the movers began carrying out Jennifer and Michael's possessions, I composed a text message that would forever change my family dynamics. Congratulations on your wedding day. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. Your wedding gift for me is in storage unit 247 at Westside Storage. The access code is 5529. All of your belongings are there, packed safely. As for the house, I've changed the locks back. Since you're now married, I'm sure you understand it's time for you to find your own place to live. This is the only wedding gift you deserve from me. My finger hovered over the send button. How had we come to this? Flashback. 3 years earlier. 3 years earlier, I'd been sitting in my downtown apartment when Jennifer called, sobbing about her second divorce and impending eviction. I have nowhere to go, Sarah, she cried. Michael and I are desperate. I still remember the heaviness in my chest as I offered them my suburban house to stay in, just until you get back on your feet. I'd purchased it when I first started making good money at Westbrook Investments, before my promotion to vice president. It was my first real achievement after my own divorce, a symbol of my independence. My parents had called me immediately after. Thank goodness you're helping Jennifer again, Mom had said, relief evident in her voice. You know she's always struggled. Not everyone can be as organized as you. The pause before organized spoke volumes. It was their way of acknowledging my success while simultaneously diminishing it. Being organized wasn't the same as being brilliant or ambitious or hardworking. It was simply being practical. It's just temporary, I'd assured them, and myself. Dad had chuckled. You've always been the responsible one, Sarah. Even when you girls were little, you were saving your allowance while Jennifer spent hers on candy the same day. What he didn't mention was how they'd always give Jennifer extra money when she ran out, while I was praised for not needing help. My responsibility became my burden. Her irresponsibility became her charm. I remembered my ex-husband's words during our divorce proceedings. You take care of everyone except yourself, Sarah. It's why I felt invisible. At the time, I dismissed his comment as a selfish justification for his affair with a younger colleague. Now, as I offered my house to Jennifer rent-free, I wondered if he might have had a point. At my parents' home, 2 weeks ago, the tension was palpable from the moment I arrived at my parents' home for dinner 2 weeks ago. Mom and Dad's colonial-style house had aged along with them, the paint peeling slightly, the garden not as meticulously maintained as it once was. At 78 and 80, they were slowing down, though they refused to acknowledge it. Jennifer, Michael, and my parents were huddled in conversation when I walked in, falling silent immediately. Jennifer's face held that same look she'd had as a teenager when she'd borrowed my clothes without asking, a mixture of defiance and calculation. Hey everyone, I said, hanging my coat in the hallway closet, feeling the familiar tightening in my stomach that came with family gatherings. The intermittent hot flashes I'd been experiencing lately threatened to surface, and I took a deep breath to calm myself. Dad barely acknowledged me with a nod. He'd been a high school principal before retirement, used to being the unquestioned authority, a role he still maintained at home. Mom, ever the peacekeeper, ushered everyone to the dining table where her famous pot roast waited. So what's this important wedding stuff? I asked, trying to sound casual as I sat down. I'd already contributed $25,000 to their wedding, money that was supposed to cover everything but somehow never did. Last month, it was a vintage car for the ceremony. Before that, a champagne fountain requiring special insurance. Let's eat first, Mom suggested, her hands slightly trembling as she served the food. I noticed new age spots on her hands, the skin more translucent than before. A wave of tenderness washed over me, quickly followed by the familiar weight of responsibility. Soon they would need more help, and I knew exactly who would be expected to provide it. Dinner proceeded with strained small talk. Dad discussed his golf game while Mom kept refilling wine glasses. Jennifer and Michael exchanged glances that made my neck muscles tighten. At 50, Jennifer still possessed the luminous charm that had always made her the center of attention. Michael, a twice-divorced construction supervisor with perpetually tanned skin from outdoor work, watched her with the devoted gaze of someone who couldn't believe his luck. As Mom served dessert, her apple pie that reminded me of happier childhood days, Jennifer cleared her throat dramatically. Sarah, we need to have a serious conversation. I set down my fork. Let me guess, you want to release doves at the ceremony? Or maybe hire a skywriter? This isn't a joke, Jennifer snapped, her perfect features hardening. This is about your wedding gift to us. I raised an eyebrow. My wedding gift? I thought the $25,000 I already gave you was my gift. Jennifer glanced at Michael, then our parents, before turning back to me. We've all been talking, and we think there's something specific you should give us. The room felt suddenly airless as I waited. Your house, she said finally. The one in the suburbs where Michael and I have been living. The confrontation. I nearly choked on my wine. Excuse me? We love that place, Michael chimed in, as if that explained everything. We've been living there for 3 years now, and it feels like home. It's the perfect wedding gift, Jennifer added with frightening certainty. We've already planned the renovations and picked out new furniture. For a moment, I thought they were joking. The house was worth over $400,000. I'd spent 7 years paying off that mortgage, working overtime, sacrificing vacations and social life. You can't be serious, I said, setting down my glass carefully to hide my trembling hands. I already gave you $25,000 for this wedding, not to mention you've been living in my house rent-free for 3 years. I don't even make you pay utilities. Jennifer's face flushed with anger. Her beauty had always been her weapon, but age was beginning to soften her jawline, etching fine lines around her eyes despite the Botox I knew she'd been getting. We thought you'd be happy to help us start our married life. By giving away my property? My voice rose despite my effort to stay calm. Property that I worked incredibly hard for? Do you have any idea how many hours I put in to afford those houses? How many years I spent paying off those mortgages? Sarah, Mom cut in, her voice sharp. Don't be so greedy. You're successful. You have another house. Your sister is getting married. This would be a wonderful gesture. The word greedy hit me like a slap. I looked at her in disbelief. Greedy? I've been supporting Jennifer for years. I paid for her car repairs, her last vacation, and now a lavish wedding. How am I the greedy one here? How dare you? Jennifer shouted, jumping to her feet, her face contorted with rage. You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your 2 houses. I stared at her, stunned by the sudden outburst. You're selfish, Sarah. All you think about is yourself, she continued, practically spitting the words. Look at you, 55 years old, divorced, alone, and getting older by the minute. No husband, no children, nothing. In a few years, no one will even look at you as a woman anymore. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I glanced at my parents, expecting them to intervene, to tell Jennifer she'd gone too far. Instead, they sat there nodding. Your sister has a point, Sarah, Mom said softly. Jennifer has found love again. She's building a life with Michael. You should help her. After all, it's not like you have a personal life to invest in. The room started spinning. My own family, people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, were attacking me for not giving away my property. Worse, they were using my age and divorce status as weapons against me. I can't believe what I'm hearing, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've worked my ass off for everything I have. Jennifer has been living in my house rent-free for 3 years, and I've given her $25,000 for this wedding. And this is how you thank me? By demanding more and insulting me? I grabbed my purse and stood up, feeling the first stirrings of a migraine beginning behind my right eye. I'm not giving you my house. Not now, not ever. Sarah, sit down. Dad ordered in the same authoritative tone he'd used when I was a child. But I was no longer that obedient girl. I was heading for the door when Jennifer called after me. You'll regret this. You're going to end up alone with nothing but your money and your precious houses. In the aftermath, I drove aimlessly after leaving my parents' house, too upset to go straight home. The cold January air seeped into my car despite the heater running at full blast. My head throbbed with the beginning of what promised to be a severe migraine, a recent development in my 50s that my doctor attributed to perimenopause and stress. Hot tears blurred my vision as I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot. Inside, I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth, my hands still shaking. One large black coffee, please, I told the young barista, my voice unsteady. As I sipped the bitter liquid, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Calls from Mom, Dad, and Jennifer. I silenced it and placed it face down on the table. The messages started coming in immediately after. Mom, Sarah, please come back and discuss this rationally. Dad, your behavior was unacceptable. Call us immediately. Then Jennifer's messages, each worse than the last. You've always been jealous of me. No wonder you're still alone. Who'd want to be with someone so cold and selfish? Those wrinkles aren't going away, you know. I turned off my phone completely. The cruelty of it all was overwhelming. These were people who were supposed to love me, support me. Instead, they were treating me like an obstacle to their plans, plans that involved taking what was mine. As I sat there, a memory surfaced, my 10th birthday, when Jennifer, then 5, had thrown a tantrum because I was getting presents. My parents had given her one of my gifts to make her feel included. It was a small betrayal, one of hundreds over the decades, but the pattern was always the same. My needs subordinated to hers, my achievements minimized, my sacrifices expected. I thought about my ex-husband David, how he'd felt neglected because I was always solving family crises. I thought about the promotions I'd worked for while simultaneously managing Jennifer's repeated emergencies. I thought about my parents' subtle dismissals of my career as merely a substitute for real fulfillment through marriage and children. As I sipped my coffee, something crystallized inside me. I made a decision. Tomorrow, after work, I would go to my suburban house and tell Jennifer and Michael they needed to move out. I'd been more than generous letting them live there rent-free, and this was how they repaid me? No more. They had 2 weeks until their wedding, plenty of time to find a new place. For the first time in decades, I would put myself first. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The locked door. The next day at work, I could hardly focus on the quarterly investment reports. I kept replaying the dinner conversation in my head, each time feeling a fresh wave of anger and hurt. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, I was ready to confront my sister. I drove to the suburban house, rehearsing what I would say. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't cry, I would simply inform them that they had 30 days to vacate the premises. A generosity considering I could legally give them less time. My temples throbbed with tension as I turned onto the quiet street lined with oak trees I'd once admired when I bought the place. When I arrived, I noticed Michael's pickup truck wasn't in the driveway. Good. It would be easier to talk to Jennifer alone. I walked up to the door and knocked firmly. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I could hear movement inside, the faint sound of footsteps. Someone was definitely home. Jennifer, open up. I know you're in there, I called, ringing the doorbell repeatedly. After several minutes of this, I tried my key. It didn't work. Confused, I tried again, jiggling it in the lock. That's when it hit me. They changed the locks on my house. The audacity was breathtaking. I pulled out my phone and called Jennifer, my hands shaking with rage. What do you want? She answered, her voice cold. Why the hell are the locks changed on my house? I demanded. There was a pause. Then Jennifer laughed. Actually laughed. It's not your house anymore, Sarah. It's ours now. Have you lost your mind? That house is in my name. I paid for it. I own it. Not for long, she said smugly. And don't bother threatening to call the police or sue me. We both know you'd never take your own sister to court, especially not with mom and dad's health issues. You wouldn't want to upset them, would you? She knew exactly which buttons to push. Our parents' health had been declining. Dad's heart condition, mom's arthritis. The implied threat was clear: cause trouble and be blamed for any deterioration in their condition. Jennifer's eyes started, but she cut me off. Goodbye, Sarah. The line went dead. I stood there on my own porch, locked out of my own property, staring at my phone in disbelief. My first instinct was to call my parents. Surely they would talk some sense into Jennifer. But then I remembered their faces last night, nodding along as Jennifer insulted me. They wouldn't help. They'd never taken my side over Jennifer's, and they weren't about to start now. Back at my downtown apartment, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sank onto my couch. My mind raced with possible solutions. I could call a lawyer, I could call the police, but would I really want to see my sister arrested? Despite everything, the thought made me uncomfortable. As I contemplated my options, my phone dinged with a notification. Jennifer had posted something new on Facebook. Against my better judgment, I opened the app to see what she'd shared. My stomach dropped as I read her post. With heavy hearts, Michael and I, along with my parents, have decided not to invite my sister, Sarah, to our wedding in 2 weeks. Someone who doesn't behave like family doesn't deserve to be present on our special day. We look forward to celebrating with all our other loved ones. The post already had dozens of comments from relatives and family friends, most expressing confusion or asking what happened. Jennifer wasn't responding to any of them, leaving everyone to speculate. Almost immediately, my phone started ringing with calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all wanting to know what was going on. I ignored them all. What could I possibly say? That my sister demanded I give her my house as a wedding gift, and when I refused, my entire family turned against me? I turned off my phone and finished my wine, then poured another glass. The situation seemed surreal. 24 hours ago, I was just a woman going to a family dinner. Now I was being publicly disowned by my sister 2 weeks before her wedding. As the initial shock wore off, a plan started forming in my mind. Jennifer and my parents thought they had the upper hand, that they could bully and manipulate me into giving up my property. They were wrong. If they wanted to play hardball, I could play too. But I needed to wait for the right moment. The wedding was in 2 weeks. That would be my opportunity. The plan, those 2 weeks dragged interminably. At work, I threw myself into projects to stay distracted. The familiar rhythm of analyzing investment opportunities and advising clients provided some comfort. My assistant noticed the dark circles under my eyes but knew better than to ask personal questions. At home, I avoided social media and kept my phone on silent. Occasionally, I'd check for messages from my parents or Jennifer, only to find more guilt trips and insults. "Your stubbornness is breaking your mother's heart," Dad wrote. "She can barely sleep." None of them showed any remorse or understanding of how inappropriately they'd behaved. The entitlement was staggering, as if my decades of support entitled them to everything I owned. I contacted Jim, a locksmith I knew from when I'd locked myself out of my downtown apartment last year. "Jim, I need a special favor," I told him over the phone. "I need you to meet me at my other property on the 14th. The current occupants changed the locks without my permission." "No problem, Sarah," he replied. "I can handle that for you." Next, I reserved a storage unit not far from the suburban house and paid for 3 months in advance. I also hired movers for the wedding day, giving them specific instructions on what to do. The night before the wedding, I hardly slept. Doubt crept in during the quiet hours. Was I going too far? Would this permanently rupture my family relationships? Then I remembered Jennifer's mocking laugh when she told me the house wasn't mine anymore. My mother's casual dismissal of my life achievements because I wasn't married with children. My father's enabling of Jennifer's entitlement all our lives. I thought of all the therapy sessions I'd attended after my divorce, where my therapist gently suggested that I might be reproducing unhealthy family dynamics in my marriage. Always giving, never receiving. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, she told me. It's necessary for healthy relationships. It was time for me to set boundaries, even if they hurt. Return to the present wedding day. And so here I was, on Jennifer's wedding day, reclaiming my property with a new set of locks and movers carrying out boxes of their belongings. I thought I would feel vindictive satisfaction, but what I felt instead was a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. As the last of the boxes was loaded into the moving truck, I took one final look around the house. The walls Jennifer had painted bold blue would need to be restored to their original warm beige. The furniture they'd removed would need to be replaced. It would take work and money to undo what they'd done, but I had both. What I'd never had before was the courage to stand up for myself against my family. I locked the door with my new key and drove home. Once there, I poured myself a glass of champagne, not to celebrate hurting my sister, but to mark the beginning of my life on my own terms. At 8 p.m., when I knew the reception would be in full swing, I sent a text message to Jennifer. The response was almost immediate. My phone exploded with calls and texts from Jennifer, from Michael, from my parents, even from some relatives at the wedding. Jennifer, you ruined my wedding day. How could you do this? Mom, Sarah, your sister is in tears. What have you done? Dad, this is unacceptable behavior. Call us immediately. Michael, you had no right to touch our things. The messages kept coming, growing increasingly desperate and angry. My parents threatened that they'd tell the entire family what a terrible person I was. Jennifer swore I'd regret this for the rest of my life. I turned off my phone, took my champagne to the bathtub, and enjoyed a long, peaceful soak. The hot water eased the tension that had lived in my shoulders for weeks, perhaps years. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt completely at peace with my decisions. The next day, I slept until noon, another small rebellion against a lifetime of responsible early rising. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were dozens more messages, but I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I opened my laptop and began composing a social media post of my own. I've been quiet about recent family events, but I feel it's time to share my side. 3 years ago, I allowed my sister and her fiance to live rent-free in a house I own. Recently, they demanded I give them this house, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, as a wedding gift. When I refused, they changed the locks, claimed the property as their own, and uninvited me from their wedding. Yesterday, I reclaimed my property and moved their belongings to a storage unit. I'm deeply saddened that my generosity was met with such entitlement and that my parents supported this behavior. I wish them all well, but I've decided to step back from these relationships for my own well-being. I hesitated before hitting post, wondering if I was being too harsh or airing too much dirty laundry. But then I remembered Jennifer's public uninviting of me from her wedding and the cruel messages about my appearance and divorce status. I deserve to tell my side of the story. I hit post and closed my laptop. Within hours, my post had hundreds of comments. To my surprise, most were supportive. Your sister is delusional. Who demands a house as a gift? You let them live there rent-free for 3 years, and they wanted more? My cousin Rachel commented, now I understand why you weren't at the wedding. For what it's worth, Jennifer was asking everyone for expensive gifts. She literally told me my planned gift wasn't good enough. I hadn't expected this outpouring of support. I'd been prepared for everyone to side with Jennifer, as they usually did. Instead, people were reaching out to tell me they understood my position and thought my sister was being unreasonable. Meanwhile, my parents and Jennifer continued their barrage of messages. The tone gradually shifted from angry to pleading. Mom, Sarah, please call us. We need to talk about this as a family. Dad, your mother is very upset. This isn't good for her blood pressure. Jennifer, you've made your point. Can we talk now? I didn't respond to any of them. After years of being taken for granted, of having my generosity exploited, I needed time and space to process everything. Rebuilding. 6 months later, 6 months after the wedding incident, I found myself sitting across from Robert at a small Italian restaurant downtown. At 58, he had laugh lines around his eyes that deepened when he smiled, and a calm demeanor that put me at ease from the moment we met at the hiking club. "You seem distracted tonight," he observed, reaching across the table to touch my hand gently. I smiled apologetically. "I received a text from my sister today. She's pregnant." Robert nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. Over the past 2 months of dating, I'd shared my family saga with him in bits and pieces. Unlike previous men I'd dated, he never rushed to judgment or offered simplistic solutions. He simply listened. "And how do you feel about that?" he asked. It was a simple question, but one that required a complex answer. "Conflicted," I admitted. "Happy that there's going to be a new life. Sad that I might never know my niece or nephew. Angry that Jennifer might be using this news to manipulate me into reconciliation without a real apology." I took a sip of wine, remembering how different my life had become in the months since I'd reclaimed my house. I'd hired painters to restore it to its original colors and replace the furniture Jennifer and Michael had removed. I'd listed it for rent at market rate and found reliable tenants, a young professional couple who paid on time and treated the property with respect. I'd started attending therapy regularly, exploring the family dynamics that had shaped me and learning to recognize my own value beyond what I could provide for others. I joined the hiking club where I met Robert, rediscovering a love for nature I'd forgotten during years of 60-hour work weeks. Most importantly, I'd learned to establish boundaries with my family, at work, and even with new relationships. "Jennifer's pregnancy doesn't change what happened," Robert said carefully. "You can be happy for the child without erasing the hurt they caused you." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. "I think I'll send a simple congratulations text. Nothing more, nothing less." Later that night, after Robert had gone home, I composed my response to Jennifer. "Congratulations to you both." 3 words that acknowledged her news without reopening the door to manipulation and entitled behavior. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. As I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 55, I saw the silver strands in my hair that I'd stopped coloring, the fine lines around my eyes and mouth that marked decades of experiences. But I also saw a strength that hadn't been there before. A woman who had finally learned her own worth wasn't determined by her usefulness to others. I thought about my parents, now approaching their 80s, and wondered if reconciliation might be possible someday. Not the false harmony of my continued sacrifice, but a genuine relationship based on mutual respect. I wasn't ready yet, but I was no longer ruling it out entirely. For now, though, I was focused on building my own life. One based on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation and exploitation. My relationship with Robert was developing slowly, thoughtfully, each of us mindful of past wounds and careful not to repeat old patterns. At work, I delegated more responsibilities, making time for hobbies and self-care that I'd neglected for years. The world hadn't fallen apart when I stopped being available 24/7, contrary to what I'd always feared. As I drifted off to sleep, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. My sister's unreasonable demand had been painful, but it had also been the catalyst for the most profound growth of my adult life. Sometimes, I realized, the greatest gifts come from the worst betrayals, not because of them, but because of how we choose to respond. For the first time in decades, I was choosing myself, and I was truly happy.